Hi all and welcome to the January product update from MobileCaddy. I should say January 2018, so Happy New Year to everyone. On the call today with me is Paul, our CTO, Todd, our Mobile Chief Technical Architect, and Frank, our Lead Product Engineer. As become norm with these updates, we've taken our selection that we'd like to call out for you from a number of updates that has been made both to the package, the container, and some of our libraries. All of the details on each of those can be found on our developer site, developer.mobilecaddy.net, under the release notes. But let's dive into some of the detail of the items that we've picked out for this month's update. Firstly, I don't think we've started the call with you, Frank, but around the containers and some interesting updates on recovery.
Hello, Justin. Yeah, that's right. So it's little update to recovery on our base container app builds now. If you enter the recovery process, you're now met with a bit of a new screen. So you've heard me talk about local and remote recovery before. Local being where you can access the recovery system without any network or platform communication at all, and remote obviously coming from the Salesforce platform. Now our base builds have both access to local and remote, and this is protected by the pin lock screen that I've talked about in previous podcasts as well. So yes, a small update, but I think it's an important one since you now have a few more recovery options. Hopefully, if you get into a sticky situation, this will really help you out, no matter if you've got network connection or not. And as always, we've protected this so people can't tap around on whatever buttons they're not supposed to. So yeah, that's the recovery update.
Thanks, Frank. Sounds excellent. And just to iterate the power of the local recovery. So if I've got a device malfunction or something like that, Frank, what would that mean to me? So I'm in the worst possible position I can get. I've got to get out of jail card here.
That's right. Yeah. So I think one of my examples for worst possible scenario is if your network card in your device is suddenly conked out and you can't get any network access at all. You'll be able to access local recovery, read all your data, extract them from the device. So hopefully you've got zero data loss, even though you've got zero way to connect to the platform at all. So yeah, it's pretty handy in the worst case scenario, I think.
Yeah, brilliant, Frank. I love this. Keeping on that, because part of that is it's a very powerful feature, but wants to be locked down. So there's been a lot of work done on this challenge response pin recovery, which we've covered in previous updates. But that sort of segues us nicely into Todd, within the application that actually gets built. I know we've got this idea of some extensions and settings and starter apps and seed apps and all things that get people going quickly. But to understand, we've got an update, some documentation to sort of surface a similar pin recovery type thing coming through for the application itself, so within the client's application.
That's right. Yes, Justin, exactly. And so following on from the enhancements that Frank has just spoken about, we also included updates to our seed and shell apps. So this is the settings area that you speak about that gets pulled into each and every application that gets built with MobileCaddy. And in there, we had an existing kind of developer area and recovery area. And what we've done is we've included the behavior of this enhanced pin access to those functions. And those was put into our shell apps, along with some extra diagnostics tooling as well, and an updated deploy service, which I think we spoke about previously, but in essence is beginning to pass more version information into Genesis, our dependency engine, upon the deployments of applications. So all of this was, as I said, built into the new shell and starter apps. And what we've done now is put together some documentation, which is really a set of instructions that a developer can run to pull those updates into any existing application that's already been built. So whether it's in the field and it's on its own version 8 of this, those instructions can be run to bring in these improvements, hopefully without any kind of friction.
Fantastic.
That's been used yeah, I think that's already been used on several live apps that we've got out. So it's kind of quite proven out already, which is nice to see.
Lovely. And all the documents we're mentioning at the moment, Todd, they're all public and available.
That's correct. Yeah, over on our developer.mobilecaddy.net /docs website, they're all up there.
Fantastic. Thanks very much. Yeah, really good stuff on here. And again, this is an acceleration piece, but we shouldn't undermine or not talk about the fact that because it's written and pre-tested in a lot of cases, you know, with the speed, you don't lose the robustness. So yeah, really good. Thank you. Switching gears a little and to sort of Salesforce as a platform, we all know it has its oddities, if you like, things that are obviously very useful, but maybe slightly different, particularly with some of the legacy objects and then items that have been around in Salesforce for a while. Paul, there's been, well, I was going to say some activity on activities, but do you want to give us an update?
Yeah, I'll excuse your pun, Justin. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, if you think back to our early releases of MobileCaddy, so I'm going back like 4+ years now, you have to choose which areas of functionality to bite off first, and which will provide maximum benefit to the customers. And so, you know, we looked at custom objects initially. We gradually moved on to standard objects, and where there are some real sort of idiosyncratic problems there, we leave them, and we've gradually over the years filled in those gaps. And one of the sort of the last or the final ones was these fields in you know, our customers may have come across these fields. There are some lookup fields and special ones on legacy objects, the legacy standard objects, where you can actually look up to more than one different object type. I mean, a classic is the owner of a queue. You know, it can be the owner of a case can be a queue, or it can be an actual user record. So, and of course, the big one is your activities, the tasks and events. And you see, you can hang a task or an event of virtually any object, compare it to virtually anything. Now, under the bonnet in MobileCaddy, in those early days, we'd look at the Salesforce metadata underneath, and we'd say, right, well, it would produce you a list of objects. Of course, that list was generally one long, and we'd use it. So we picked the first one off, and that's the one we'd use. Anything with more than one, such as these, we just didn't support. So now we've changed that algorithm, that processing inside our engine now, so that MobileCaddy knows from the data that comes up in our special proxy field. So if you create an offline master data child record, that child record comes up. We've got our own special proxy ID that developers has slotted in via the utils there. And instead of us having to say, oh, I wonder which of these objects this goes to, or just forgetting it and picking the first one, we now analyze that. We've rewritten things and analyzed that. We know exactly from our own metadata where that goes, and we reparent it correctly. So we can now support, and we focused on tasks and events. We've made sure that they're fully mobilized, and those objects are now available to our customers.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, so we're slowly digging down to some of these oddities. I mean, in the sense that it sounds like the MobileCaddy package is doing all the work, but in terms of configuration on the platform, Paul, is there any difference if I was to create an offline relationship for, say, you know, account to contact, a sort of standard normal type lookup to these new, or do I do the same sort of thing?
It's you know, there's still a few details in it as it's going through testing to be ironed out, but at the moment it's actually minimal in terms of the change and the impact on the customer there, Justin.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, so as we might be worth just touching on, the configuration for the offline relationships is all done on the platform. So that's well documented there, and the nice thing is that's then fully abstracted for the developer down on the utilities libraries, and so we can now look at really a full offline, including those activities, those task events, and as Paul says, we're coming into queues as well. So this is really helpful, as you say, because the chances are there are activities hanging off multiple objects as you start to design your application.
Yes, and one final touch on that, Justin, is that, of course, a customer, a developer may build an app so that you have tasks and events, activities hanging off multiple different objects, and they could come up together, and naturally, we'll naturally, with our new algorithm, handle that, and they'll be parented to the correct record.
Fantastic. And that's, I think, in a lot of these cases, we are looking at the technical detail and talking about maybe, how that's, why that would be there, how it's handled, but the pressure it takes off the design. So even from a functionality point, when we're starting to design applications that the partners or clients are, this just takes, again, an amount of pressure off the design team, amount of pressure off the developers, and of course, because it's all tested within the package, we can give a lot more robustness going through. So yeah, fantastic. I suppose on that same theme, Todd, you've mentioned on a number of calls now, last couple of three, I think, the idea of changing how we view star traps and how we get applications, moving quickly. But you've also been talking a lot about, how to bring other functionality in, maybe into second or third or fourth versions and so on. Maybe you could just give us an update on how we're doing with the starter apps.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. As you said, I've been rambling on a bit in the last couple of episodes of the product update on these, what we were calling MobileCaddy add-ons, and actually they've been rebranded now. These are the MobileCaddy app extensions, and I think if I remember correctly, we had one which was GA at the time, which was our REST, our kind of REST wrapper for Salesforce. We had two in beta, which was global search and recent items extensions. Those are both now in GA. They've had, I think the recent items ones actually had a PR against it, which is excellent. So some additional functionality was kind of added there based upon usage by a partner. And actually, one of the things I was quite excited about is the recent items extension was actually used with an app recently, but used for kind of like a flagged items behavior, which is really nice to see just how flexible they are, and what some of the partners are up to with them. So yeah, a good positive update, I think, in terms of the shell and star traps as a whole, but definitely is this towards this idea of the extensions that we're calling them. So hopefully we'll have a blog out soon to cover these off in a bit more detail for those who'd rather read about it as well. Yeah,
thanks, Todd. And you sort of alluded to the pull request there, and the fact they're as the seed and the shell and the star traps in general are. Now, these are all available publicly.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, they're all available on our public GitHub repos. They're up there. So yeah, if you fancy taking a look, please do, and yeah, start including them in your apps.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think all of this is interesting in terms of the speed, and again, just to put in the robustness piece as it comes on, but also I think a time pressure. If you've got a project, and as Todd was alluding to there, being able to look maybe as a sideways view at some of these extensions, and you can achieve, other front-facing functionality with some of the extensions that are there. Yeah, fantastic. Being January, there's all sorts of things going on, of course, but one of the things that is rolling on rapidly towards us is the Spring 18 update from Salesforce. As we're probably all aware on the call, we have 3 major releases from Salesforce that we need to make sure that we're all working well with, and all the client apps are working well with. So we get access, as many ISVs will do, to early releases in this case December, and then we start to have Sandbox pre-release access during January, and then finally we're all heading towards the sort of 3rd and the 10th or something like that in February for the releases. Frank, there's a lot of testing that goes on. It's a busy time for us, isn't it? Sort of starting mid-December in this case onwards. How's the container apps looking in general in Spring 18?
It's all looking good. I think I'm pleased to report. As you know, as soon as we get a hint of these major releases coming, our process and our testing really kicks in, and it doesn't just kick in and then sits there and waits for the release. It kicks in and stays kicked in all the way up until release. So as you know, we watch things at a patch by patch level. We're testing it. Minor changes. We have different tests for major changes. So yeah, no issues coming through so far. But we're always watching, and if there's anything that we see that's even a little slightliest bit wonky, we'll raise that where we can and where we need to. But otherwise, it looks like a good release so far.
It's nice. We haven't had any presents, Frank, and at least that ones to deal with. Yeah, I mean, Frank's definitely alluded to the fact that there's these tests going on, and I think we publicised some of that through the trust site. But the quantity of tests that are run on a rolling basis is, well, I think we've had a blog post released by Salesforce on this, and it's one of those things that if you don't do it, it's going to catch you out. So it's very, very important, and it gives a lot of confidence both to our clients, partners, and of course to ourselves. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Frank. We mentioned earlier a couple of updates in documents, and sometimes the documentation is around pulling processes together to give patterns as much as new functions or features and so forth. And Paul, I know we've been talking about standard Salesforce and Salesforce sort of standard features and functionalities, but there's a document that was released that sort of fits the bill there.
Absolutely, yes. It follows on nicely from before, doesn't it, Justin? Where we were talking about functionality and how we've had a backlog and we've chewed off major pieces and so on. Lead conversion is one that our customers have asked about, and it's something until now we've not really got involved in it. The customers would generally build their own differing solutions, and what we've done is we've looked at those and added our own flavour, if you like, to that, and we've come up with a recipe stroke best practice, our recommendation of how we tackle lead conversion. And I'll try not to go into too much technical detail, is that I'm often criticised for. So but basically what our customers are doing recently, having used this recommendation, this document, is they'll leverage the power of MobileCaddy by creating from their lead record, they'll create a lookup to each of the objects that are produced on a Salesforce conversion, so to opportunity, account, and contact, and they'll be mobilized, and there'll be another we call it a control or a conversion control field, which is we generally recommend a pick list. Well, we do recommend a pick list in our best practice guide here, and they'll have a couple of values in there, such as do not convert if they don't want that lead converted. Awaiting, they'll set it to awaiting, and when they want it. This is when a lead is created or updated on the application on the device, and what will happen is they'll so if you look at the mobile app itself initially, Justin, they'll create a lead. If they don't want it converted, then that conversion control field is set to do not convert, and they carry on as normal. If they wish it to be converted, then they would set that to awaiting, but they at that time on the device they would set those fields, those opportunity, account, and contact lookup fields to the correct to point to the correct object. That can be a proxy ID, it's all done offline, but that is, and the application itself will then be built to consider that as converted. Okay, and what then happens is on a full sync refresh, that data would come up, and obviously the correct IDs would be resolved by MobileCaddy, so you'd have a lead, and those fields would correctly point to that data. Everything's now online in Salesforce, and we then ask the customer to produce a batch process, and we've got a fully working example of this batch process that they can just lift and change to suit them. And what that batch process does, Justin, it will iterate through all of the leads where that conversion control field that I mentioned is set to awaiting, and it'll say, okay, I know I need to do a full Salesforce convert, and it will use the Apex is the database.lead convert object, and Apex can Apex convert lead call to do the conversion. Once that's done in the batch job, they iterate through the results, and the success messages, they will set that conversion control field to say that it's been converted, or in the case of an error, you can have an error if the mapping fails or something fails that's been configured incorrectly by the administrator on the platform. It would set it to error, and there's an optional there, and I know some of our customers have used that. They'll set a workflow rule up on that conversion control, which will notify them when it's actually undergone a conversion, or where there's an error, and that we find works very well indeed, Justin, and that's all nicely documented there, and we've got that on our developer site.
Yeah, I love that, and I think you know, obviously pulling together some core functionality of MobileCaddy and then bringing it into a best practice is something we have done recently on a number of areas, and I think this one actually also covers that sort of idea of the resilience, robustness, and an offline first approach. Why it's so important, even if there's only a 5% potential for the loss of connection or the drop of connection, and when you explain those processes through, if all that's to happen on the platform but doesn't make it because of the connection, you know, the rollback for us, the retain retry model will just push that back up. And in terms of the application user, the speed there as well as the robustness is key. So a lot of things come into that best practice and lean on. So yeah, really good to see that. And it's again rounding out some of the features and how they can be used to satisfy some fairly standard items that you'd get on the Salesforce platform. Yeah, fantastic. And I think that rolls off in terms of our documentation. We've got a number of clients using Windows 10 container applications, and this is where the hybrid approach of MobileCaddy being a single code base to run on a number of different operating systems comes into play. I say our latest release, it's been around for a year or two now, is targeting Windows 10. And Frank, again, sort of documenting process and also sort of uncovering some process in terms of working with sandboxes in the developer side. Could I ask you to talk a little bit on the Windows 10 side?
Yeah, definitely. So if you've ever used our mobile apps, you'll know that you can switch login host easily through the settings page. On Windows 10, it's possible to change login host as well, but it's a little bit different to the mobile app. So we have a new documentation piece that covers how you can change to a sandbox or a community or whatever you need when you need to change your login endpoint. So that's all nicely documented. It's got some examples in there, and just for good measure also contains improved examples for the mobile apps as well, with more steps, so you can't get lost at all.
Thanks, Frank. Yeah, that's great, and it sort of services something that's been available for a little while. As Frank's saying there, it's a slight difference. Of course, there are differences between the OSs, and we'll see a push on documentation in general with some new releases of help sites and websites coming forward. It probably will touch on in the coming next or the one after updates here, just from an access perspective. Slightly different focus on documents as we round off the items we've pulled out just to cover today. MobileCaddy is, as we've said a number of times, it's a metadata-driven architecture. It means that there's lots of flexibility. It means that if Salesforce or other providers that we're working in terms of environment change, we can react. But it also means that we can have stability through releases, so we can protect both the running user and also the developer and anyone in UAT, QA, for example. But there are times, and they do happen, where the metadata changes or we're introducing new metadata, and we drive those, Paul, don't we, by a series of compressed documents. I wonder if we can just touch on that and the newer approach that's coming out now.
Yeah, certainly. I'll try and do this in a not too deeper fashion, but you're right, Justin. We have on previous calls talked about the different MobileCaddy components, and we've referred to things like the sync class and different types of column. Salesforce recently introduced a time-only field, but that would be a new column we'd have to test. and that would go into another MobileCaddy component called a column set. So we have numerous of these, and they're not always available to all different versions of the package. You know, and because we wish to operate in a very dynamic fashion, what we'll do, we'll test these components and we'll release them in a document. And until now, that's been released with a with a MobileCaddy package off the App Exchange, and yeah, so it's tied against that particular package. And if an upgrade happens and we know that it's backwardly compatible and we want it to be backwardly compatible, what we have to do is actually build a new package and release it, or send out a document and ask the customer to install it manually. And all of these are burdens on the customer, and they're also hassle in terms of managing releases for us. There's also another issue, which is actually quite common, and that's when a customer will refresh a sandbox. Generally, not a full sandbox. The most common sandbox is a normal developer sandbox. And what happens is they'll refresh their production org with MobileCaddy in, and they'll ask us to activate their sandbox for them, to mark it as available to MobileCaddy, which we obviously do for them gladly. But then what happens is that the documents are missing, and that's because, of course, when you refresh to a developer sandbox, Salesforce omits documents, even if they're part of a managed package. So we've had, we and our customers have had hassles with this in the past. So what we've done, we've built a solution in where, against our own internal systems, we mark which documents are valid, which components are valid against certain releases of our package, of our managed package. And what happens now is when that sandbox is refreshed, or a new install goes in, the package now will check with our back-end systems, and it will pull those documents across for the customer, so they're instantly available. And that's fantastic on an activation of MobileCaddy, but it's also great on a release. So you could be running, say, version 135 of our package, and we determine there's a new feature, a new component, or something that we wish to add to that document. We can add that to our own internal systems, and by merely visiting the Startup tab, that document will become immediately available to our customer, who will then follow the straightforward instructions to load it in. So it's taken a huge management way. Something that sounds quite straightforward, it has actually taken a great weight off our mind, and it's made our customers' lives much easier, Justin.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think we won't go into any more detail on the Genesis system, but I think as we come through, and we've said before, we really do spend a lot of time thinking about dependencies and decoupling, but also controlling, and that's one of these areas which I think, particularly in the dev cycle, when you've got the wind behind your back and you need to be moving quickly, this is going to be one of those things that will become very, very appreciated, and then probably ignored because it's just so quick and easy. Thanks, Paul. I know there was a lot of effort across the board put in for that. So I think as that draws us to the close of the items we've pulled out, as I say, the release notes available on the sites for the package and the libraries. So it just leaves me to say thanks to Paul and Todd and Frank and all the updates and the work that's gone in for those. If, as you've heard, some requests have been pushed into the style traps and extensions, but if you've got any other ideas or requests for new features, updates, please let us know. You can mail us on info@mobilecaddy.net or on any of the social channels that we're on. And with that, have a good month, and look forward to the next update. Thanks all.